You probably have heard a lot of propaganda about Salvadoran President Bukele's crackdown and all of those gangs, like the Maras and all that, and how he has applied a new police state in El Salvador, and he has done a lot of things, that people have praised, and he is ultimately considered like a god, or he even declared himself as he declared himself to be a dictator. And so on this podcast, I want to talk about this, and I want to reveal to you the plain and simple hidden truth behind Bukele's crackdown on crime and his newly created police state. Please join me. The New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries present the Messenger of the Lord with Apostle Yeshua, preaching the gospel of the good news of the kingdom of God and informing you about world events in the light of Bible prophecy and preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Apostle Yeshua. I have been watching recently lots of videos posted on YouTube about El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele, and what I have observed, noticed, and have perceived from a very spiritual and analytical point of view and discernment is the fact that just like China's Xi Jinping, North Korea's Kim Jong-un, Russia's Vladimir Putin, Cuba's Miguel Díaz-Canel, Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro, Nicaragua's Daniel Ortega, and recently Colombia's Gustavo Petro, and other popular dictators and fascist leaders throughout the world and of history, I do firmly believe that Bukele is another so-called benevolent dictator, quote-unquote, who has been trained, indoctrinated, and has been placed in power by the black evil and sinister hand of the Freemasons and the Jesuits in order to create a new police state, as they have already done in the U.S. God has revealed this to me and has truly confirmed it by the holy oracles to me, his end-time servant and priest and prophet. This plain and simple truth is also attested and confirmed by this article written on September 26 of 2021. Nayib Bukele calls himself the world's coolest dictator, but is he joking? El Salvador's president is consolidating power and seems intent on rewriting the country's constitution. Among the colorful houses of Comunidad Iberia, a very marginalized and really and truly impoverished neighborhood of San Salvador, the dark glass cube of the Urban Center for Welfare and Opportunities, or CUBO in its Spanish acronym, is an eye-catching piece of urban architecture. Inside, local children take art classes, read in the library, and play online games. Outside, in typical Jesuit propaganda fashion, a mural depicting Armando Bukele, the father of El Salvador's new president, extols Salvadorans to live with love and responsibility, quote-unquote. Futuristic, Instagrammable, and faintly ominous, the Cubo is a fitting tribute to Nayib Bukele's presidency. Since coming to power in June 2019, the 40-year-old former publicist has adopted Bitcoin as legal tender, used his social media accounts to generate an approval rating that is the envy of presidents worldwide, and has severely introduced authoritarian measures to undermine the country's political opposition and civil society. On Tuesday, speaking for the first time at the UN General Assembly, he took a selfie on the podium and told the audience that a couple of images on Instagram have a greater impact than any speech in this assembly. Then he recently updated his ever-changing Twitter bio to the coolest dictator in the world. But increasing numbers of Salvadorans suspect a darker truth behind the trolling, as I am about to reveal in this podcast now. Last week, an estimated 15,000 people took to the streets of the capital to protest against Bukele's growing authoritarianism, destroying a recently installed Bitcoin ATM machine in the process. It was the latest sign that Bukele's sky-high approval ratings, which regularly exceed 80%, may be starting to slip. Having won the February 2019 presidential election with 53% of the votes, which as usual were probably manipulated by the Jesuits just like Biden's election in the US was, and many other political leaders around the world for that matter, Bukele benefited from popular anger over violent crime and the corruption and incompetence of the traditional ruling parties, the cuvos, of which an additional 21 have been commissioned across the capital, are the friendly face of its territorial control plan. And please make a huge note of this word control, which you'll find that I'll mention throughout this podcast, which also involved the retooling of the armed forces, members of which turned up at the National Assembly in February 2020, guns in hand, and well prepared and ready to dissuade the opposition from resisting the plan. I think it is very clear now who is in control of the situation, Bukele reportedly said. Through these measures and a secretive pact with the country's notorious gangs, which the Jesuits themselves patronized and supported for ages due to their drug trafficking, to the obvious ruin and detrimental scourge to civil society at large. Bukele managed to bring the homicide rate to historic lows. His decision to press corruption charges against El Salvador's spectacularly unpopular and traditional political parties also won him support. Bukele flipped the tortilla, says Edwin Ramos Sigüenza, a 26-year-old tourism worker. Today is not the Salvadoran people who are feeling the pressure, it's the political classes who have hidden their corruption behind their own laws. They're the ones feeling the heat. Yeah, I bet. Please don't make me laugh. Introducing Apostle Yeshuram's new book, Everything That You Never Knew and You Need to Know About Life. The answers to life's enigmas, mysteries, puzzles, and riddles. Published author Yeshuram Hetziba brings to the reader in this fabulous work some of the most compelling and thought-provoking subjects and topics that will indeed enlighten you to a superb and amazing sort of compendium of knowledge and understanding, which is also intended to provide the reader with some real and very interesting answers to some of life's most difficult, hard, and intriguing questions. This work explores and will try to bring into light those most basic fundamental explanations to some of the most puzzling and trivial questions that humanity may ever ask about life itself, as well as other enigmas. Everything that you never knew and you need to know about life. You can get your copy at barnesandnoble.com, lulu.com, sweetpublishing.com, and get your copy today. Remember, everything that you never knew and you need to know about life. This book shows you some of the most fundamental things that you never knew and you need to know, like why are you here on this earth? What happens when you die? What's going to happen next? Is World War III going to happen very soon? And many, many other answers to life's most puzzling enigmas, mysteries, and riddles. You need to get this book, Everything That You Never Knew and You Need to Know About Life. You better get your copy today. Few world leaders have navigated the COVID-19 crisis for their own political benefit better than the Salvadoran president. The Jesuit created and well masterminded pandemic was a blessing for Bukele, says Carlos Lopez Bernal, a Jesuit professor of history at the University of El Salvador. He presented an apocalyptic scenario to which the only solution supposedly was to give the president everything he asked for: more money and more power. That's just exactly what the globalist Masonic elite want, don't they? Even after a slight dip in response to the hasty and error-laden Bitcoin law, Bukele's approval rating remains above 75%, boosted by promises of Chinese investments in large infrastructure projects and a regional leading vaccination campaign. Obviously, a very typical Jesuit tactic, since they are the ones who control Big Pharma. The interesting thing about Bukele, as a popular statesman and Jesuit trained leader he is his ability to capitalize on popular disenchantment with the political parties while proposing nothing, says Lopez Bernal. Bernal claims that he has no interest in ideology, yeah right, and that there's no political thinking behind his plan for the country. A former marketing executive well trained in Jesuit propaganda, who regularly shows up to work in skinny jeans and a baseball cap, didn't Trump also wore one? Bukele meticulously documents each of his political wins on his prolific Twitter account, with a familiarity for internet vernacular and dexterity that escapes most other politicians. He updated his profile pic to feature the laser eyes of all the cryptocurrency enthusiasts after announcing the Bitcoin law as a way to get people in El Salvador used to the idea of a new digital currency coming soon from most centralized banks and governments worldwide. And when the country's newly acquired Bitcoins lost 17% of their value, he announced plans to buy the dip. For Bukele, the extents justify the memes. He has used his popularity to consolidate and perhaps extend his stay in power. In February, his party won a supermajority in legislative elections. A year later, he wasted little time replacing judges, just like Masonic ex-president Donald Trump did in the U.S. on the Constitutional Panel of the Supreme Court, and approved a plan to fire all judges over the age of 60. He has also created a hostile atmosphere for local independent media and civil society. Aside from his penchant for dark aviator sunglasses, which is typically and obviously the iconic hallmark and trademark of most of the occultist satanic dignitaries and celebrities around the world, Bukele has far more in common with Central America's historical dictators than initially meets the eye, but of course, the Jesuits trained him and placed him and all of the rest of them historically in office, according to Greg Weeks, a professor of Latin American politics at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. His tactics are identical to Latin American strongmen like Augusto Pinochet, Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez, etc. throughout history. He said he is putting loyalists in key positions of power using intimidation against the legislature and opposition and attacking the media. Bukele's ultimate goal appears to be rewriting the country's 1992 constitution, signed in the aftermath of El Salvador's civil war, in order to radically reshape the politics of the country. In September, days before Salvadorans celebrated 200 years of independence, his newly installed judges in the Constitutional Chamber ruled that he could run for consecutive terms. How convenient, right? Why is it that this sort of thing doesn't surprise me? And shouldn't surprise any of you either. In recent years, courts in neighboring Honduras and Nicaragua have abolished term limits intended to prevent presidents becoming entrenched in power. The bicentennial is a significant date, and on social media the talk is of a new republic with a new constitution, says Lopez Bernal. But behind the pretense of reform, the real motive is for Bukele to remain in power in order to propagate and secure the Jesuits' historical hunger and appetite for power and control. And the Salvadoran institutions are too weak to protect the Constitution or put limits on a megalomaniac Masonic president. His example could provide a blueprint for copycat strongmen across the region, said Weeks. Bukele's actions will instill more confidence in many Jesuit-trained Latin American politicians that they can manipulate and violate in typical Jesuit and Masonic fashion the Constitution for their own belief. I have a picture of him doing the famous cornuto devil's horns sign and wearing those dark glasses, satanic glasses. Besides what the article says, what I find very disturbing and dangerous in the region, including the U.S., is that there's a huge trend being implemented by the Jesuits and the Freemasons at all levels of creating and establishing a police state, and thereby fulfilling their centuries-old goal of creating all of these so-called benevolent dictators all over the world in order to have complete control of the masses and the population, as is also the case as well with all U.S. authorities under the so-called Patriot Act, which was concocted by the Jesuit and Masonic leaders in the U.S. after 9/11. I was watching on a video last night from YouTube about Bukele that the military and police forces in El Salvador can also arrest you on a whim without any motive, suspicion, or question. This is total despotic repression and oppression, no matter how you look at it. And very soon you will see this all over the world. Police units going door to door like they do now in El Salvador, and they did in my natal Cuba recently after the public protests of July 2021. And now under some martial law or dictatorial type of enforcement rules and regulations, they will arrest and imprison anyone at will. This will probably include many true Christians as part of the worldwide persecution of saints coming up that has been prophesied in the Bible to occur in these end times. In Nazi Germany, for example, recall that not only were Jews taken to concentration camps, but also many minorities like gypsies or any malcontents who were in opposition to the Jesuit-induced Nazi dictatorship. So my friends, I really want you to think about this for a moment, and I really want you to reflect on this because, now they're going after supposedly criminals and after gangsters and against, all kinds of criminal delinquents and whatnot. But very soon, who will they imprison next? That's the question. Who will they go after next? After us, as Christians. Okay? Just because on a whim, they may think that we are dangerous, that we're troublesome people. That's what they did with the Jews in Germany. Please, wake up. It's about time you wake up to this fact. So for all of you who are continually watching and observing the political arena and the corridors of power around the world in the media and the news, please be also very aware that this simply is the implementation and the modus operandum, or MO, of the New World Order, the NWO, and their nefarious and sadistic, satanic and very evil tactics and agenda. Please remember that the Jesuits and other Masonic orders and organizations like the Knights of Malta have a powerful grip and control on all military, law enforcement and secret service forces around the world, for they are a military regime, regimini militantis. What is happening in El Salvador, China, North Korea, Russia, Cuba, Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and very soon in the U.S. is no joke and no laughing matter. You need to wake up. So until next time, this is Apostle Yeshurun saying goodbye, friends. You have heard the messenger of the Lord with Apostle Yeshurun, preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. For more information on this podcast and this program, you may write us by email at Yeshurun, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. Again, that is Yeshurun, Yeshurun, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. This podcast was sponsored by the New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries, and by the free will offerings, tithes, and donations of those who are listeners of this podcast and are supporters of this great work of God. The preceding program has been a Plain and Simple Truth Ministries presentation.